Hi guys, Jenny here again. Now, when I did the channel update video, you may remember that I said I'd been sent this camera by Reolink and I was going to do a video about that. That's what we're going to do this time. We're going to take a look at what we're getting. We're going to take a look at how we configure it, and then we're going to take a look at how we get it integrated with Home Assistant so that we can use it with our automations and view the camera on our front end. So that's what we're going to do today. Let's get to it. Right, so when we get one of these Reolink cameras, this is the E1 Zoom, what do we get in the box? Obviously, first of all, we get the camera. We also get a power supply. We get a mounting bracket that lets us mount the camera onto a wall or a ceiling or something like that. We get a little bag of screws and plugs that we can use to attach the mounting bracket to our surface of choice. Of course, we can stand it on a table, we don't have to screw it to a wall. We also get a little tool that we can use to press the reset button on the camera. And last of all, we get a little package with the instructions in. Okie doke. I don't think we need to open the instructions right now, so we'll go straight ahead and get it set up. Okay, first, having a close-up look at the front of the camera, you can see that there is a SD card slot and a little hole for you to insert the reset button pin. I have added a micro SD card into this camera, but I would like to note it does not come with one as supplied. You have to add your own. I'd just like to point out that you don't have to have an SD card in the camera for the camera to work. It will work just fine without one. Obviously you won't be able to record directly on the camera, but there are ways of recording elsewhere thanks to the features on this camera. Okay, when we come to set up the camera, we can either do it using the Reolink app on the mobile phone, or we can do it using the PC software which is available from the Reolink website. Now, if we take a look at the bottom of the camera, you can see that underneath there is the small QR code, and that's the barcode that we scan with our phone in the Reolink app. Directly underneath it, in very small writing, is the UID, that's the unique identifier. And if we set it up using the PC software, that's the code that we need. Okay, so I have installed the Reolink desktop PC software, and if I click over here, you should be able to see that and the camera. Now what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the camera, and then all we do is just wait.
"30 seconds later."
Okay, so we can see that the camera is now initializing. It's going to go through its startup procedure, and then it should start beeping at us. That's the welcome sound. And that string of beeps means it's ready to be set up. So if we come into the app and click the plus to add a device, we can then, because I'm doing it on the PC software, we can then enter the UID. You can also add it by the IP address in the next option if you've already set the camera up. We haven't yet set this up. Well, I have, but I've reset it back to factory conditions so that we can go through this procedure. So we're going to have to type in the UID here on the PC. If you're on the mobile phone, you can scan the barcode underneath. Okay, we can now connect to the Wi-Fi. And we're going to put in the Wi-Fi information. So to do this, we can type in the SSID here. And put in the password. And press next. Okay, what we need to do next is scan that QR code on the screen using the Reolink camera. So I'm going to hold up the Reolink camera so that it can record that image on the screen, and that will give it all the Wi-Fi credentials it needs and get it set up on the network. Once it's done that, it'll ask me to give it a password and a name for this camera. So if you've got more than one, you can have them all integrated in the same app and they'll all have different names. I'm going to go and do that off screen, reposition the camera, and then we'll come back and take a look at the settings and features. Okay, so we've got that set up now nicely, and we can move the camera over to a different position. If we click on the little cog here, we can configure the camera. We can adjust the display, whether we want to show watermarks, time and date, and so on and so forth. Quality of the stream we want to use. The alarm settings is for the motion detection, which is built into this camera, and we can adjust the sensitivity of it here, and we can set time periods so that it works at some times and not at others, which can be quite useful, especially indoors. If you're using it in the house, you can use it so that it's only active at night, for instance, and so on. We can adjust whether the status light is on or not, whether it uses its infrareds or doesn't. If they're off, don't expect a good picture at night time. In the surveillance options, we can set up the recording, whether it overwrites anything that's already on your SD card when it runs out of space, and so on. We can also set a schedule. There's lots of useful settings here, and we can have the camera automatically email us when motion's been detected. We can have it upload the videos to FTP. So you remember earlier when I was saying, what if we haven't got an SD card? If we want to record, we can still use the FTP and upload it to a different server that we run in our house, or you could do it online. The siren will sound when the motion is detected if you turn this on. It is quite loud. I'm not going to play it here because it is quite irritating, but I should imagine if you're using it at night in your house and you wanted it in an area, it would be a good deterrent. And you can set up a schedule for push notifications. If you've got the app on your phone, it will do push notifications over that system. You can change your network settings here, and it will show you what your current network settings are and your IP address. You can obviously set static IP address here and so on. In the storage section, it will show you how much space you've got left on your SD card. And in the system, you can add or rename users and passwords, set the date and time, and perform some standard maintenance, such as auto rebooting every so often, and doing any firmware upgrades that might be needed. So that's all looking pretty comprehensive. We can see on the screen that it's obviously showing the back of my very untidy room, and we can pan around using the controls. The other thing that we can do, and this is probably the most useful use of the zoom function. At the moment we're zoomed quite in because of the position where I've put it. We can press this button here and set presets. So we can preset this position. It's number 1. We can rename that if we want. I'll just leave it at 1 for now. we can then move to a different position. Let's look over that side of the room, say. And then if we want, we can zoom out. I can see my daughter in the kitchen lurking behind an iron there. When we've found the position that we want to look at, we can hit the preset again and press the add a preset button. So now we've got 1 and 2. And now we can quickly and easily go between position 1 there we go, and position 2. So that's rather handy. This camera's also got a thing where you can set a guard point. If you hit the reset guard point, it will set the point that the camera is currently looking at as the guard point. So say for instance you wanted the normal view of the camera to be, let's say we wanted it to be over here somewhere. We press the reset guard point, it says succeeded, and now in the setting here we can choose how long we want it to return to the automatic guard point by turning it on here. So for instance, if there's a particular area that we wanted the camera to monitor the majority of the time, we can put that on there, and whenever we've panned or zoomed away from that spot, after that amount of time has elapsed, it'll go back to this point, and that's rather useful. As I was saying earlier, you can see that the shot's a bit out of focus, but we can adjust it quite easily using the focus buttons here. And once we've got a nice focus, we can get a fairly good picture. Okay, so what do I think of the camera? As it stands, as a standalone camera, it's quite good. It gives a nice picture. It's a good enough resolution as you can clearly identify whoever is being recorded. It's got some useful features such as motion detection and so on. And if you just configure the mobile app as it comes out of the box, when you walk out of the house and you're not connected to your own Wi-Fi, you can still connect to the camera. On the mobile app, there is also a push to talk button. So not only do you hear the audio from the camera, but you are able to talk directly to whoever you're seeing on the camera. So that could be useful if you're using the camera as a baby monitor or something like that. It does rotate almost a full 360 degrees, so you have a massive amount of range that you could cover with this camera. And in that regard, it is very good. It's certainly a lot higher quality than some of the other cameras I've used at a similar price point. So I'm quite impressed. Before we go and get this set up in Home Assistant, you might be thinking, if we can access the camera from outside the house, from outside our own network, and the only thing we need is the UID, how secure is this? Well, that's a good question. And as you probably know, I'm not a fan of cloud services. So, that being the case, there are some things that we can do. One option is to go into the settings and disable UID access. We can do that on the PC app. Another option is to put the camera onto an IoT network. And a lot of people run a system like this. I myself run a system like this, where my IoT devices are on their own separate Wi-Fi network. And that network is isolated and has no internet access. It has access to things like Home Assistant, and other devices that need to access it can access it, because I set up my own rules in my router configuration. If you've got a system like that, you can do that again, but you will immediately lose the access to the camera from outside the house. There are ways around this, however. I don't want to go into setting up one of these systems now, but if you've got a VPN that works at your home so that you can connect to your home network using a VPN, that works perfectly. So if you use that system, you can still use the app when you're outside the house to monitor the camera and to speak and allow your voice to be played out from the camera. And that's great, that works a treat. But you have to be connected to the VPN first, because if you've disabled the network access, obviously it cannot automatically access the outside world. Another thing that it does, even if you disable the UID, is it sets its own time system. And it does that, and it phones home periodically. So another way around this is if you've connected it to your IoT network, in the time settings you can give it a different NTP server so that it knows to get its time from a different address. And if you've disabled all the internet access, it's going to need to get it from somewhere. And there's an add-on for Home Assistant that maybe I'll look at next time or in the future that provides an NTP server as an add-on to Home Assistant for your network. And that's great because it means that your IoT devices can get the time directly from your Home Assistant installation. The next thing we want to do is get this camera configured and set up in Home Assistant. Any of the methods that I've just spoken about with the VPN or the disabling the UID mean that we're going to have to use the IP address of the camera to connect to it. Now, if you remember when we looked on my networking settings a minute ago, my IP address was clearly displayed. So we're going to use the IP address that was displayed on that page, because that's the IP address of the camera, and we're going to use that to set the camera up in Home Assistant. There are a couple of ways we can set it up in Home Assistant. We could set it up as a simple FFmpeg camera and just pull the stream from it, but we don't get much information from that. We could set it up as an ONVIF, an ONVIF camera, and if we do that, that gives us some control over things like pan and tilt as well. But there's now a better way, and that way is the Reolink integration. And this is not, I point out, this is not a standard integration. It's one of the custom components, and it's available on Hacks. So I'm going to bring up the GitHub page of that, and we'll have a look at that. This is the GitHub site for the Reolink Dev integration for Home Assistant. It's been written by fwestenberg. It's not included as standard in the Home Assistant Community Store Hacks, but it is, as we can see, a custom repository. That means we can add it to Hacks manually. It gives us some installation instructions, and we're going to follow the Hacks install instructions. And then it gives us some information about what we can do with this integration. So I'm going to go to my Home Assistant installation. This is the testing installation that I do all my tests on. I call it my development environment. It's separate from my live Home Assistant, which means that I can try things out over here before I put them into my main Home Assistant configuration. So apart from the Home Assistant Community Store, this is basically a bare installation of Home Assistant. So we go into Hacks, and we're going to go to Integrations. We need to click the three little dots in the top right hand corner here and go to Custom Repositories. And in here, we need to paste in the Reolink IP camera address. You can see I've already added it here. If you haven't already added it, you need to copy the address from this GitHub page. I'll put the link down below. Copy it from here, go over to Home Assistant, and in Hacks you paste it in there, and then you tell it the category is an integration, and you press add. I'm not going to do that now because, as you can see, I've already added it. Then we're going to press the plus to explore and download repositories. We type in Reolink, and there is the information about it. It gives us changes from previous versions and so on. And we press download this repository with hacks and press download. We can change the version that we want downloaded there if we want, but the best way is to just run the current version. We can see now that there's a pending restart. We need to restart Home Assistant for it to load that integration. So we can go into configuration, and we can go over to settings, and we can press restart, and that'll restart Home Assistant. And when it comes back, we'll integrate the camera into Home Assistant. Okay, Home Assistant is now started up again, so we can go directly to devices and entities. And then here we want to press add integration. It might actually be a good idea, before we do this, to refresh the browser, because that integrations list might not have been reloaded with Home Assistant restarting. So we add integration and we start typing Reolink, and there we can see Reolink IP camera. Now it's asking us for the host. What it wants there is the IP address of the camera. So in my case that's 10.12.29.126. It's then asking for the port, and we can leave that standard. And then at the bottom we need to give it the username and password to be able to connect to the camera. And those were the username and password we set up earlier. And then press submit. When it's finished, we should get a success. And if we want, we can tell it what area this camera is going to be in. I'm going to tell it it's in the living room. And press finish. Now if we click now, down here we can see the Reolink IP camera integration is there, and it's named E1 Zoom, because that's what we called this camera when we set it up. If we click on the device, we can see that we've got some information about the device. We can turn on and off FTP upload on the camera. We can turn on and off automatic email sending if it receives motion. In the sensors, we've got the camera itself and the motion detection. There's also a last event sensor. First one, the IR lights, doesn't turn the IR lights on or off. When it's on, it allows the IR lights to come on automatically when it gets dark, whereas if you turn it off, they're always off. Turning on the siren means the siren will go off when motion is detected. We can turn on push notifications, record audio. Obviously, if we turn that off, it will just record the picture. And recording for recording. If we go back to the home screen of Home Assistant, this is an automatically generated one. I haven't adapted this in any way at all, but we can see there straight away we've got the camera picture. Okay, one thing that's really cool with the integration from the community store is that any videos that have been recorded by the camera are available through Home Assistant front end. You just come over to your media browser section and you can see we've now got a Reolink IP camera section. If we click in there, the next thing we get is the camera by its name. Then it's organised by date. So there's the date, and it will give us a list of all the videos that were recorded by the camera and the time and the length of the video. So we can play those in here, or we can use the Home Assistant streaming method to stream it to another device. Okay, what else can we do? If we go to the developer tools, we can see the camera is, the entity ID is called camera.e1_zoom. We can now go to services, and we can do various different things. We can set the sensitivity. We can put camera.e1_zoom Zoom, and then we can press sensitivity, and then we can type how sensitive we want the motion detection to be. We can see here that 50 is a high sensitivity, 25 is an example. Let's say 40. Press 40, press call service. That's gone green, so that has changed the sensitivity of the motion detection on the camera. What else can we do? We can use the PTZ control. So again, we need to go entity underscore ID is camera dot E1 underscore zoom. Now, if we're using this integration, these are the commands we've got available. We can decrease the focus, increase the focus, move left and down, left and up, right, and so on. These aren't that useful because once you've fired them, once you've called the service, it will keep moving indefinitely until you send another command to stop. So that's not much use unless you tell it to move at a slow speed. However, the topos, which is to position, is really useful. So we can put command to pause, and then we can do preset. Now you remember earlier when we were using the Reolink app, we could set some presets for quick recall. We can use those presets here. Now, Home Assistant doesn't know the name of any of the presets, just the numbers they're in. So the order you would define them in is the order of the numbers. So 1 is the first one, 2 is the second one. So if we put 02 here and call service, I can hear the camera moving. If we go back to our home screen, and we can see that it's moved to the next position. Okay, another thing we could do is we could set up a simple dashboard like this. This is very straightforward. So we've got, if I go into edit the dashboard, we've got a picture entity card at the top. If I go to edit, a picture glance card. I've just called it camera, told it which camera we want to use, that we want the live view, and then I've added the motion sensor as an icon at the bottom. Then for the preset cards, these are just button cards. I've turned off the entities, given them name preset 1 and preset 2, and told it to call the service. Service is the Reolink Dev PTZ control, and then we tell it the entity is the E1 Zoom, and the command to pause preset 1. And likewise for preset 2. So now we can press the preset button, and the camera, I think we're already on preset 2. So let's go to preset 1. There we go. And the camera moves to the next preset. And we can press preset 2 again, and it'll go back to where preset 2 was. So this is really handy to be able to have this in your Home Assistant front end. And with your recordings being available in the media browser, it makes it really useful. Obviously, if you're using something like Motion Eye or Blue Iris or something like that, then you can integrate that in there as well. The addresses for the RTSP streams are in the network settings of the cameras set up within the Reolink app. So you can find those and put it into Motion Eye or Blue Iris or whatever. The only problem is, if you use Motion Eye, you will not be able to use the motion detection that's on the camera. And that's fine because Motion Eye provides its own. So it's up to you. If you want to integrate it with Motion Eye and just pop in the stream address in Motion Eye, use Motion Eye to arrange your recording, that's great, just do it like that. But if you want to do it like this, it works really well, and it gives you storage on the SD card in the camera, which is accessible through the Home Assistant front end. And personally, I find that very useful. Overall, I think this is a nice little camera. If you're looking for an indoor camera that will do pan and tilt and integrate with Home Assistant, it'll also integrate through the app if you use an account on the Reolink Cloud with Google Home or She Who Shall Not Be Named. And this allows you to connect them straight to your Google devices or your Amazon devices. Now, I don't like the cloud. I'm not keen on cloud services in general. So the fact that I'm able to access a lot of this through Home Assistant, to me, is great. And that's how I'll be using it. I'll have the camera connected using the IP address so that I can use the voice when I want to. Chances are that's going to be not very often, to be honest. But it is a handy thing to have. It's a useful feature. And there are instances where I could see it be useful. In fact, this morning I used it to tell the dog to come back upstairs. But there we go. It really is a nice camera. And for the price, I think there's not much you can do better. If we look at the Reolink website, I'll give you the product link in the description down below. We can see that it's here on sale at the moment at only £67.75. And that's not a bad price at all for a camera with all the features that this has got. It would be nice if Reolink developed their own integration with Home Assistant that was kept up to date with their devices. However, in the meantime, the Reolink Dev from the Home Assistant Community Store from Hacks works great, and it gives you a lot of functionality. All in all, I think this is a good little camera. It's got a good resolution. Having an adjustable focus is fantastic. The zoom function and the pan and tilt, while in themselves aren't that useful on the fly, for monitoring different areas all at the same time, they're invaluable, because you can preset one location to look there and another location on another preset. And because of the camera having its own motion detection, the camera itself has to detect the motion rather than a third-party software. If you use a third-party software, the danger is when you pan the camera, that pan action might be construed as motion, which isn't ideal. Because we've got all this information now available in Home Assistant, we can write automations based on the motion on the camera. We can tell it on motion that we want to send a notification to our mobile phone app, or whatever we want. All in all, I think this is a great little camera. It's got good features, the picture's excellent, it's more than good enough to be able to identify people. Although I haven't shown it, the night vision does work very well, albeit in black and white, but to be honest, black and white is much better for IR night vision. Trying to use full colour night vision is not normally a good way to go. thanks to Ivan at Reolink for sending this camera to me for my review. I am very impressed with it, and with using the Hacks Reolink Dev integration for Home Assistant, it works brilliantly with Home Assistant as well, and that for me is a big thumbs up. Hi guys, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please consider hitting the subscribe button down below and the bell so that you get notified when I post new videos. Also, if you'd like to support my channel, you can check out my Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee pages. And in any case, remember to hit the thumbs up. Till next time guys, see you soon.